3 days, that's all it took. Just 3 days to change the course of human history. So let's walk through those 3 days together. And to do that, of course, you have to start at day one. That was the day that those followers of Jesus watched him climb Golgotha Hill, carrying that cross. And I can promise you that nobody standing there on that hillside that day could have seen where those 3 days were going to go, not on day one. Because on day one, it was bleak. On day one, followers of Jesus, they watched helplessly as the one that they had put all of their hopes in was mocked, beaten, and spit on. And they watched helplessly as the one that they put all of their hopes in was nailed to that cross. A punishment, by the way, that was reserved for the worst criminals. And they watched helplessly that day as the one that they had put all of their hopes in breathed his last breath on that cross. They thought Jesus was their rescuer. They thought Jesus was their savior. They thought Jesus was their king, and they expected him to lead them to victory, to defeat all the forces of evil that had been working against them. But now, on day one, reality came crashing in on them as they saw Jesus hanging up on that cross, and all of their hopes were dashed. And we know that because there was actually two people who happened to be there that day in Jerusalem at Golgotha Hill, who witnessed Jesus take his last breath. And they actually say something as they look back on that day and they describe what they experienced that day. They say something that is so revealing and honest about their experience. This is what Luke tells us in Luke 24 that they said. We had hoped. We had hoped he was the Messiah. Had hoped. Past tense. Not anymore. Because saviors don't die. Rescuers don't get crucified. And victors don't walk down roads of terror and tears. So guys, this is day one. Day one is the day where the hopes and expectations that you had come crashing up against reality. So I'll just ask you, have you ever had an unmet expectation in your life? That's a bit of a rhetorical question because we all have, right? I mean, where the hopes and expectations that you had for something never got realized. And don't overthink it. It can be small things. Cowboy fans, you know what I'm talking about. Happy Easter. I'll tell you one of mine. Jenny and I, we were on a breakfast date several years ago, and we started talking about this observation that we had made about our lives at that moment. And this was the observation. I think I might have brought it up, and I said something to her. I said, we're not spontaneous anymore like we used to be in college. And I wish so badly, looking back, if someone would have been eavesdropping on our conversation from the next table over, and at that exact moment leaned over and said, yeah, that's because you're adults now. And you have kids, and you have responsibilities. But nobody stopped us, so I blame them for what I said next. So I said, let's do something spontaneous today, right now. And we thought about it for a moment, what we could do, and then I was like, I got it. Let's go get a dog. This is a horrible way to make decisions in life, guys. And for the next 3 or 4 hours, we just daydreamed about getting a dog. And man, those 3 to 4 hours were great because when you daydream about having a dog, you know what's not in the daydream? Let me tell you what's not in the daydream. Throwing your back out from picking up bags of dog food that weigh 130 pounds. Not in the daydream. Not in the daydream all the hair on the furniture. Not in the daydream all the chewed up shoes. And so we picked up the kids and we drove to a farm about an hour away and we picked out our dog, Levi, and we started to head back home. And guys, I'm not kidding. We weren't more than 5 minutes on our way back home before Levi let loose every ounce of food I think he has ever eaten all over that car. Not in the daydream. And expectations came crashing into reality real quick. And listen, if I were to ask you about some unmet expectations in your life today, some of you might tell me a pet story or two. But my guess is that it wouldn't take very long for many of us to bring to mind deeper disappointments that we've experienced in life. Your own day one experience. where the hopes and expectations that you had for your life came crashing into reality. In fact, for some of you, you may have heard those words just a moment ago that those first followers of Jesus said on day one all those years ago, I had hoped. And you know that sentiment, you know that statement. You could finish that sentence for your life because you've had your own I had hoped moments in life. I had hoped our marriage would last. It didn't. I had hoped that we'd be pregnant by now. We're not. I had hoped to be further along in my career at this point. It hasn't happened. I had hoped that they would be clean and sober right now. They're far from it. I had hoped my parents would have stayed together. They didn't. I had hoped I would have never heard the doctor say those words. Those are day one disappointments. And on day one, those followers of Jesus came face to face with the disappointment that comes when you don't get what you had hoped for. But then sometimes we experience day one disappointments when we get everything we wanted and hoped for, but it lets us down. It's the disappointment that comes from getting the thing that you wanted most and then discovering that it didn't deliver on the promise that you thought it would give you. I had hoped the title, the promotion, the kids, the achievements, the grades, the relationship, the home, the new fling would do something for me. But at some point, the new and shiny always wears off, doesn't it? And you're left with the same insecurities that you had before. And your expectations come crashing into reality. See, look, guys, man, it could look 1,000 different ways. But what those followers of Jesus experienced that day, and what so many of us have experienced here, is that day one is the day when the thing you wanted least is exactly what you ended up getting. And that's precisely what happened to Donna on a crisp fall morning a few years ago. And I wanted you to hear her story.
I drove our son, Jack, to school, to Warwick High School that morning, and had no idea that that would be the last time I'd ever see his face or hear his voice. While I was at work, at that same time, first responders were cutting the doors and the roof off to get Jack, our son, out of the car. When I walked into the emergency room, I saw Warwick police, I saw chaplains, I saw social workers, and I knew something really bad had happened. The surgeon came in, and he sat down across from me, and he told me he didn't make it. And the next thing is I was on the floor. I was on the floor just screaming, Jesus, no, no, no. This just can't be true. But I just couldn't believe the words. I just couldn't believe the words, he didn't make it. When we got home from the hospital that night, there was just evidence of Jack. His toothbrush was still on the counter. His laundry was still in his basket. And just what do you do? What do you do with that? I loved being his mother. I loved being his mom. I didn't even know who I was anymore. Like, who am I? Who am I now? The things I used to do, the things I used to think about, the things that were just so normal to me, like nothing made sense anymore. I would wake up and think, there's a really good chance that this is just a bad dream. I really believed that for months. And it's not going to be true. And Jack's going to be home. He's going to be in his bed where he belongs. I never really was angry with God. I was just angry. The further time marches on, and you just feel like you're just getting farther and farther and farther away from their life, it's very hard to process that. Friends encouraged me to journal the first year, and I came across this. I laid in your bed today. I smelled your pillow. I cried into your sweatshirts that still hang on your door. Are you really gone? God, is he really gone? I can't believe my Jack was killed. I ache deep in my bones. I cannot carry this. I know God is well acquainted with grief, but I just didn't know why. Not why me, but just why? Why? What is the meaning of Jack being killed? What am I supposed to do with this now?
So if day one is the day where the hopes and expectations that we have for our lives are dashed, day two, that's the day that it settles in on us that we have to live with this reality now. Day two for Donna was the moment that it hit her that Jack wasn't coming home. And she has all the evidence around her to remind her of that: toothbrushes and sweatshirts and pillows. And I realize that for some of you, you understand today at a very deeply personal level Donna's pain in day two because you've experienced loss in the same kind of way. But I also recognize, and I also know that many of you here, you may not have experienced a tragedy like Donna experienced, but you've got your own day two experiences. We've all got them. Where you have to face the new reality that the thing you wanted least is exactly what you've been handed. And you've moved past the shock of day one, and now day two is your new reality, even though you didn't ask for it. See, day two is when you realize he walked out on our family and he's not coming back. Day two is when you realize I cannot erase what that man did to me all those years ago when I was a child. Day two is when you realize the sickness is terminal. It's not going to turn around at this point. Day two is when you realize the relationship is over. This is my new reality. You know, it struck me this week that there are 327 verses in the New Testament that were written about what happened on day one, the crucifixion and death of Jesus. Do you know how many verses are written about day two? 1. This is what it says in Luke. Luke 23 just says, then they went home. That's it. That's all we know. Then they went home. They went home scared, confused, frustrated, disoriented. On day two, they went home to the reality that what happened on day one, that was not just a bad dream. It was day two now, and Jesus was in the grave. This is our reality now. And while only one verse tells us about day two, experience, just life experience, tells us what those first followers were doing on day two when the reality of their disappointment settled in on them. I would imagine that they were doing what Donna was doing on day two, what we all do in day two, questioning everything. You heard Donna's questions. What am I supposed to do with this now? That's a day 2 question. Is this really my life now? That's a day 2 question. But the most common day 2 question is simply one word: why? Why? Why is this happening? And if you're honest at all, if you're really honest, it's in day 2 that an even deeper expression of that question will make its way to your heart and mind at some point, and it's this: why God? Why God? That might be the ultimate why question. Why God? Do you even see me? Do you even care? Why God? Couldn't you have stopped this? Do you even exist? And listen, if you've never really considered faith, or maybe you've never opened the Bible, you've never read the Bible, this may come as a surprise to you that the Bible actually gives voice to these kinds of questions. In fact, you see all through the story of scriptures that God is not afraid of these questions. God invites them. About 1,000 years before Jesus stepped into the world, there was a collection of prayers that were written to give voice to our deepest longings and questions. And we still have this collection of prayers preserved for us today in what we call the Psalms. And there's this one psalm in particular that gives voice in such a clear and compelling way to the questions on day 2. This is Psalm 22. This is how Psalm 22 starts. My God, why? Why? Why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, you don't answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. That's the prayer of someone living in day 2. That is about as honest as you get. I needed you, God. I needed your help. I needed your healing. I needed your guidance, and yet my hopes weren't realized. Why? And guys, you can hear it in the words here. There's this sense of complete abandonment in these words, isn't there? In other words, the psalmist is saying, God, all the external circumstances of my life right now indicate that you are nowhere to be found. But not only do the external circumstances around me indicate that you've abandoned me, but also at the same time, there's no personal sense inwardly of your presence or your comfort or your love right now. I feel utterly and completely abandoned by you. And that's precisely why Jesus himself screamed that prayer out while he was hanging on the cross. My God, why have you abandoned me? Guys, listen. My guess is that some of you walked away from faith a long time ago. And it's because at some point, I don't know where you picked it up, but at some point you were sold a lie. And the lie was this. The lie was that the more you trust God, and if you just trust God more, if you just pray more, if you just follow Jesus, he's going to protect you and guard you, and he's going to bless you and make your life problem-free. And listen, guys, like all lies, the best ones always have a hint of truth in them. And this one has a hint of truth in it. And the hint of truth is that following Jesus will truly make your life so much more rich, but not in the way you expect. He will bring life in the midst of the pain. He will work in day 2, not deliver us from it. Not even Jesus bypassed day 2. He laid in that grave. And his disciples went home with questions and with doubts. And my guess is that they were never more tempted to give up and give in as they were on day 2. Because day 2 is always the moment that it's easiest to give up and give in, isn't it? To give up on hope, to give up on God, to give in to despair, to give in to cynicism, to give in to anger, to give in to bitterness. And some of you may be here right now today, and you can point back to the season in your life. In fact, you know the moment in your life that you gave up on God. It was in the middle of a day 2 season of your life that you gave up on faith because you prayed and you sought God, and it felt like if there is a God, God was silent. And that psalm we just read, it gives voice to what you have felt and experienced. But the psalm doesn't end there. Because what the psalmist said next gives the smallest glimmer of hope. that we don't have to give up and give in when we're living in day 2. This is what the psalmist said next. Yet you are holy. Yet you are holy. You know what holy means? Holy just means set apart, completely and utterly different than us. In other words, these two things can live side by side in day 2. Honest questioning, why God? While at the exact same time saying to God, yet I trust who you are. I trust that you may be up to something that I can't see right now. The psalmist is saying that even though my day 2 is nothing I would ever choose, I cannot see a way out. It feels as if you have abandoned me, that you are nowhere to be found. I will not give up. I will not give in. Yes, it feels like you've abandoned me. Yes, it feels like you are so far away. Yes, I have my doubts and I have my questions on day 2, yet you are holy. Donna asked the question that we all ask on day 2 when she said, what am I supposed to do with this now? And God answers that question and says to any of us who are in day 2, would you be willing and would you be open to bring it to me? Would you be open to trusting, God says, that I'm still holy and good and close to you? It's almost as you can hear God pleading with us, don't give up on me. Don't give up on me. Not now, not on day 2, because something more is coming. Day 2 is not the end. And Donna heard that whisper, the whisper of God saying, please don't give up, not on day 2. I have more for you. And this day 2 is not the end.
Jack's absence was screaming. It was screaming. His absence was the loudest in the house. And that's when it's just you and God. One day I went into Jack's room. This was really early on. I went into his room. I was laying flat on his floor and I was just pounding the floor, just pounding it, saying, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone, Jack is gone. And in that desperate moment, God just dropped this thought into my heart. I know it was God because I could not have mustered this up on my own. And he just said, no, Donna, you're gone. Jack's home. It was the first just sliver of light that broke through my darkness. I know where he is and I know who he's with. And that was just a turning point in my grief journey. I knew that Jesus was with me. He met me in my absolute devastating grief. He met me there and he cared for me there. And I knew he was with me.
We want you to know that God did not take Jack from us. Jack died because he was in a horrific, tragic car accident. This earth we live in is flawed and faulty, and God warned us that we would have sufferings. He never promised us an easy road. We ache in places we didn't know our soul even had, but Jack is doing just fine, and that gives us peace.
Yeah. That was all God. Some people will say to me, you were so strong up there. And I'm like, I was the weakest one in the room. What you're witnessing is what it looks like when God says, when you are weak, you are strong, because he gives us his strength. And that is precisely what happened in that moment. Sometimes I think about the day he died, but I'm training my mind to think about everything else. There was so much to him, and I'm reminded that that child was a gift from God. And Jack is in heaven right now, alive, because he knew Jesus. He knew Jesus. Only God can restore joy and give peace that makes no sense. And I have that. I have my grief. Of course I do. But I'm not alone. I have my Savior, who's in me, who's with me, who's beside me, who goes before me, who's behind me. I have Jesus. And when I get to heaven, I cannot wait to bow down at the nail-pierced feet of Jesus and praise his holy name that he has given me and my son life. And I can't wait to tackle Jack to the ground and hug him and kiss him and tell him how I've been waiting to see you. And that day will come because our Savior lives. Our Savior lives. My name is Donna, and I am most definitely a living, walking, breathing life changed by Jesus Christ. Yeah.
There is so much more. So don't give up on me, God says. Not on day 2, because the third day changes everything. Because on the third day, a few followers of Jesus went to the grave to preserve the body, but there was no body. The grave was empty. And an angel asked them a kind of snarky question when the angel said, "Why are you here at a graveyard looking for someone who's alive?" And not long after that, the living and resurrected Jesus showed up in the home of some of his followers where they were meeting, and he asked them this: "Why are you frightened? Why are your hearts filled with doubt? Look at my hands. Look at my feet. You can see that it's really me." And still, they stood. They stood there in disbelief, filled with joy and wonder, because they suddenly realized something about day 2. They were never abandoned. God was at work the entire time. And I want you to know, you've never been abandoned. So Jesus says today what he said all those years ago in that small room with his first followers. So why are you frightened? Why is your heart filled with doubt? Things are not as they appear. See, on day 1, it appeared that evil had won. On day 1, it appeared like death was all there was. On day 1, it appeared that all hope was lost. On day 2, it appeared like God was silent. On day 2, it appeared like things would never change. On day 2, it appeared like your prayers went unheard. But then, day 3, and it put everything in perspective. Every tear you shed in day 2, every cry you allowed to escape your lips, every prayer you prayed in day 2, every doubt you offered up, Jesus said, I was there the whole time. I've been there the whole time, listening to you, fighting for you. He wasn't just lying in a grave on day 2, he was overcoming hell. And when you thought God had abandoned you, he was working. When you thought God was silent, he was listening. And for any of us who feel today like we're in a day 2 moment, God is speaking to you this Easter and pressing in with a few questions that he's asking you today. He's asking, would you dare to trust that I'm still holy? Would you dare to hold on to hope that there is something more coming? Would you dare to hold on to hope that I haven't abandoned you? And yes, the pain of day one and the questions of day two appear to be the most real thing about your life, but the resurrection on day three tells us that things are not as they appear. And there is something going on that you cannot see in this moment. What if instead of giving up and giving in, what if you reached out to Jesus this Easter? How? I think you do what the psalmist did. You bring all of yourself before God, your questions, your struggles, your doubts, and you just lay it bare before him by talking to him. And then after you lay it all out there, all your questions and struggles and pain, you simply say with faith, yet you are holy. That's your way of saying that in spite of all I've experienced on day two, I trust you. That there is something more, that what you did on day three has forever altered my day two. That you can and are making everything new. So Jesus, make me new.